So I want you to think back, I don't know, maybe 15 years.
Okay, 15 years.
Yeah. How many phone numbers do you think you had memorized back then compared to today, right now in 2026?
Oh, wow. I mean, back then, easily a dozen. Probably more.
Right. You knew your best friend's number, your parents, probably even the childhood landline of the house you grew up in.
Oh, yeah. I can still hear the keypad tones from my childhood home.
Exactly. We used to be walking databases,
Mm-mm.
but today, you are incredibly lucky if you can pull maybe 2 numbers from memory.
If that.
Yeah, we've essentially outsourced our personal hard drives to the cloud. And it's gotten to the point where, I mean, I'll confess this right now, I am completely lost in my own neighborhood without a glowing blue line on a map app to guide me.
Huh. Yeah, we've all been there. It really does feel like a harmless trade-off for convenience, you know. But the underlying mechanisms of that memory loss, they are pointing to a much larger structural shift in how our minds actually operate when we hand over the reins to technology.
And that tension, that exact shift, is why we are plunging into our single source document for today's deep dive. Welcome to the deep dives, by the way.
Glad to be here for it.
So we're looking at an incredibly eye-opening paper today. It is titled, "Is AI Making You Dumber? The Research Nobody is Talking About."
It is quite the title.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore the somewhat uncomfortable truth about how our increasing reliance on AI is physically and psychologically impacting our natural intelligence.
Yeah, because we really need to break down the science of what is actually happening inside your head.
Exactly. And then, importantly, we want to equip you with the tools to stay sharp in a world that is becoming, well, almost entirely frictionless.
Right. Because this paper, it basically forces us to confront the core promise of the whole AI revolution.
Which was supposed to be a good thing.
Right. We were sold this idea that these tools would be the ultimate cognitive leverage, you know, turning us all into super geniuses who are finally freed from all the mundane tasks.
But that's not what the science says.
No, not at all. The emerging science is pointing in a very different, much darker direction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand that darker direction, we have to move past just, forgetting phone numbers. We have to look at the physical brain.
Yes, the actual biology.
Right. The paper highlights this landmark 2025 study out of the MST Media Lab. And the setup alone is just fascinating.
It really is an elegant study design.
Yeah, so they took 54 participants, and they asked them all to write an essay. But they split them into 3 distinct groups based on how much technology they were allowed to rely on.
Right, so 3 groups.
Group 1 used a popular AI chatbot. Group 2 was restricted to traditional search engines. So they could look things up, but they had to synthesize the material themselves.
They had to actually do the reading.
Exactly. And then Group 3 wrote the essay completely manually, relying strictly on their own existing knowledge.
And what's wild here is that the final output, the actual essays they wrote, wasn't even the primary focus of the researchers.
Wait, really? Then what were they looking at?
The researchers actually hooked these participants up to EEG machines. They wanted to measure the electrical currents firing in their brains in real time while they worked.
Oh, wow. So they were watching their brains function live.
Exactly. They were specifically looking for the contrast between beta waves and slower brainwave patterns.
And beta waves are the good ones, right?
Yeah, beta waves indicate active, focused problem solving. It means your brain is engaged. But the group using the AI chatbot, they showed the lowest level of beta wave engagement by a massive margin.
A massive margin.
Yes. The researchers literally described their brains as being switched off.
Switched off. That is chilling. But, I mean, if the brain isn't absorbing the facts and actively engaging with material, what is it actually doing during that time?
Well, it essentially demotes itself from an active creator to a passive manager.
A passive manager.
Right. And because the study lasted several months, the researchers actually watched this specific behavior degrade over time. The AI users became increasingly passive.
I mean, they just stopped trying.
Basically. Eventually, they were just blindly copying and pasting whatever the machine spat out, with absolutely zero critical oversight. Their brains weren't processing the language. They weren't processing the logic. They were literally just moving text from box A to box B.
And the ultimate proof of that came later in the study, right?
Oh, yeah, the recall test.
Right. When the participants were asked to quote or even just casually explain what they had written in their own essays, the manual writers remembered everything.
They owned it.
Yeah. And the search engine group sat somewhere in the middle, but the AI group, They drew a total blank.
Completely blank.
They couldn't even explain their own work. And reading through this, an analogy came to mind. Because using AI to write like this, it isn't like having a research assistant who fetches books for you.
No, it's much more invasive than that.
It is like having someone chew and digest your food for you.
Oh, that is a visceral image.
I know, but think about it. Sure, you get the final output on the plate, but your brain and your body absorb absolutely zero nutritional value from the process.
That is incredibly accurate. And what's fascinating here is the psychological mechanism behind that lack of nutrition. It really comes down to psychological ownership.
Psychological ownership, what does that look like in practice?
Well, when you write manually, you have to hold multiple concepts in your working memory. You have to weigh their importance and string them together logically.
It's hard work. It's frustrating.
Exactly. But that struggle is what forces the brain to encode the information. When you use AI, you bypass the encoding process entirely.
Because the machine did the struggling for you.
Precisely. The information never crosses the threshold from short-term output into long-term memory because you never actually own the thought to begin with.
But, knowing that the brain doesn't absorb the information, that doesn't really explain the speed of this surrender.
What do you mean by speed?
I mean, why does our biology just give up without a fight? The second a chatbot is open, why do we just instantly switch off?
Yes. The paper actually dives deep into the evolutionary biology of this. They highlight this massive joint study conducted by Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon University.
Right, this involved over 300 knowledge workers.
Yes, and the researchers wanted to measure critical thinking, but they didn't just hand out a self-reported survey, which is what normally happens.
People always lie on those anyway.
They really do. Instead, they analyzed the complexity of the workers' actual problem-solving pathways.
So how they actually did their jobs.
Exactly. Before heavy AI reliance, a worker facing a complex task would typically break it down into smaller components. They would test a few hypotheses and iterate based on failure.
Like normal trial and error.
Right. But after relying on an AI tool, those complex internal steps simply vanished. They discovered a very direct dynamic. The more a person trusts an AI, the less they engage in independent critical thinking.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this for a second on behalf of anyone listening right now.
Sure, go for it.
Because if you were listening to this, you might be thinking, isn't figuring out how to get the AI to solve this, like crafting the perfect prompt or giving it the right context, isn't that just a new, modern form of problem solving?
That is the most common defense you hear.
Right. So why is the paper calling that a total surrender?
Because it feels like problem solving in the moment. You are, after all, achieving a goal. But this subtle shift represents a total surrender of cognitive independence due to a biological phenomenon called cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading.
Yes, and to understand why your brain is so eager to hand over the reins, you really have to look at the math of your own body.
The math.
Yeah. The human brain is what evolutionary biologists call a cognitive miser.
A miser.
Yeah.
Like Ebenezer Scrooge.
Exactly like that. It is incredibly cheap. Your brain makes up only about 2% of your total body weight,
Okay.
but it burns a massive 20% of your daily energy.
20% for a 2-pound organ. That is a staggering biological tax.
It is huge. So, evolutionarily, we are hardwired to be incredibly stingy with our mental effort. We are programmed to conserve calories and avoid friction at all costs in order to survive.
Because thinking literally burns precious calories.
Exactly. So when your brain recognizes that a reliable digital agent can do the heavy lifting, it actively shuts down its own critical faculties to save energy.
So evolution is basically tricking you into being lazy.
Yes. The brain sees the chatbot, realizes it can save a massive amount of caloric energy, and just happily clocks out.
And the paper actually backs this biological theory up with another study, right?
Yes, a massive study involving nearly 700 people.
Right. And they proved a direct, measurable negative correlation between frequent AI use and critical thinking scores.
The more you use it, the worse you get at thinking for yourself.
Because the brain needs friction to learn. It literally needs the struggle. Without that friction, the mind atrophies just like a physical limb left in a cast.
A cast is the perfect way to visualize it. You are immobilizing the cognitive muscle.
But, the counterargument we constantly hear is that humanity always panics when a new technology drops.
Of course.
And we always end up fine. The paper actually anticipates that exact skepticism.
It does. It goes all the way back to ancient Greece.
Right. Thousands of years ago, Socrates famously opposed the invention of writing.
Which sounds crazy to us now.
Completely crazy.
Hmm.
He thought if people wrote things down, they would stop using their memories and just walk around with the illusion of wisdom.
And he was clearly wrong. Writing allowed us to organize and build upon complex information across generations.
Exactly. And then, jump forward to the 1970s, educators panicked about pocket calculators. They were convinced calculators would destroy children's ability to do math.
But research showed that as long as the fundamentals were taught, calculators didn't destroy mathematical understanding.
Right. So the obvious question you have to ask is, isn't AI just the modern calculator? Are we just panicking over nothing again?
This raises an important question, but the authors make a crucial distinction here. A book is a static record of information. A calculator is a tool that performs a single, specific operation.
Right.
AI is fundamentally different. It is not just a tool. It is an active agent that simulates the entire thought process.
It doesn't just hold data or crunch numbers.
No, it synthesizes, it drafts, and it reasons on your behalf.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because we actually saw the beginnings of this back in 2011.
Ah, yes, the Betsy Sparrow study.
Right, the study on the Google effect, or digital amnesia. That study revealed that because of search engines, we stopped remembering facts and started only remembering where to find the facts.
We remembered the location, not the content.
Exactly. If I need to know the capital of a country, I don't memorize the capital anymore. I just memorize the fact that Google knows it.
Which was a huge shift.
It was. So was the Google effect just phase one? Is AI just the ultimate extension of outsourcing our memory?
AI takes digital amnesia to an entirely new and, frankly, much more precarious level.
How so?
Well, with the Google effect, you were outsourcing the storage of facts. But you still had to read the search results. You had to synthesize the data, weigh the credibility of different sources, and form a conclusion.
You still had to do the mental heavy lifting.
Exactly. AI eliminates that entire cognitive chain. You are no longer just outsourcing your memory. You are outsourcing the logic, the synthesis, and the reasoning required to actually use that memory.
Wow. So what happens to the physical structure of the brain when we outsource that reasoning?
That is the scariest part.
Yeah, because to prove just how dangerous this bypass is, the paper shifts from theoretical memory loss to physical changes in the human brain. And they focus on the ultimate cognitive task, navigation.
Right. Navigation is incredibly demanding on the brain, specifically on a region called the hippocampus.
Which is absolutely essential for memory and learning.
Crucial for it.
And this brings up one of my favorite studies of all time, the year 2000 study on London taxi drivers.
Oh, a classic.
It really is. So before GPS, to get a taxi license in London, a cab driver had to memorize 25,000 streets.
25,000, just imagine that.
And the process was literally called the knowledge. When researchers scanned the brains of these drivers, they found their hippocampi were significantly physically larger than the average person's.
Your brains actually grew.
Yes, their brains had grown dense with neural pathways just to accommodate the intense friction of navigating that complex city.
Now contrast that with the 2025 trend, which is the exact opposite.
Probably because we rely entirely on GPS today.
And because of that, our navigation skills are disappearing. And crucially, because the hippocampus is never being trained by that struggle anymore, we are actually eroding the structural integrity of our memory.
But the hippocampus doesn't just process spatial maps, though. It has a much broader function in how we think, right?
Yes. It acts as the brain's associative engine. The hippocampus handles episodic memory.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning, if you learn a complex fact about economics, and then you learn a nuanced fact about history, the hippocampus is the bridge that allows you to see how they interact.
Oh, wow.
It's the part of the brain that connects disparate concepts together to form a cohesive idea.
So when you stop navigating, you aren't just losing your sense of direction.
No. You are weakening the exact biological hardware your brain uses to think complex thoughts.
So what does this all mean for you and me in our daily lives? The paper translates this physical navigation into professional grunt work, basically.
Grunt work, yes.
Summarizing long documents, drafting routine emails, writing basic code. We all hate this repetitive, tedious work.
We do, and AI is absolutely magical at doing it.
It really is. But the harsh reality this research exposes is that this miserable grunt work is actually the training ground for mastery.
It's where you learn the ropes.
Exactly. If you use AI to skip the boring fundamentals, you never build first principles knowledge. You end up a hostage to the machine because you don't even have the fundamental skills to spot when the AI makes a mistake.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally alters your value as a thinker. You cannot verify the output of a machine if you do not understand the process yourself.
Right, you're just taking its word for it.
And through the boring, grinding repetition of drafting those basic emails and structuring those basic arguments, you build mental models.
The friction builds the muscle.
Yes. When you bypass the grind, you bypass the expertise. You become someone who can only manage outputs, not generate insights.
Oh, listen, boycotting AI entirely is completely unrealistic.
Oh, absolutely.
Refusing to use AI today would be exactly like refusing to use a computer in the 1990s. You would just be left behind by a world that is becoming exponentially more productive.
You'd be obsolete.
Right, if AI allows one person to do the work of 10, the answer is definitely not boycotting it. But if blind dependence literally shrinks our brains, how do we actually survive this?
Well, the solution they propose is pretty brilliant in its simplicity. We have to build a mental gym.
A mental gym.
Yeah. Look at the physical body. Modern technology, cars, elevators, escalators, food delivery apps, all of that removed almost all the physical friction from our daily survival.
We no longer have to hunt or gather or chop wood.
Right. But we quickly realized that if we don't move, we get sick, we become weak, and we deteriorate.
So we invented the gym. We literally built rooms where we go to deliberately lift heavy pieces of metal just because it is hard.
We pay money to struggle.
Yeah. We artificially reintroduce physical friction into our lives just to keep our bodies from falling apart.
And we must now apply that exact same philosophy to our minds. We need to intentionally seek out mental friction to counteract the frictionless convenience of AI.
So brain training is no longer just a hobby for retirees doing Sunday crosswords.
Not anymore. It is a vital necessity for professional and cognitive survival.
And the paper actually outlines specific daily exercises to help with this, and it's just 10 minutes a day, which is totally doable.
Very doable.
First, doing math with our calculators, even for simple addition or, splitting a bill at a restaurant. Just force those neural pathways to fire.
Right, don't just reach for the app.
Second, memory exercises.
Yeah.
Actively try to recall patterns or sequences instead of immediately looking them up. The authors frame this as an act of deliberate rebellion against digital amnesia.
I love that phrase, deliberate rebellion. They also strongly emphasize focus training to combat distraction.
How does that work?
Well, AI encourages us to take the path of least resistance. It gives us instant answers without the journey. You have to train your ability to concentrate by tracking multiple elements and making rapid decisions.
Just to maintain your attention span.
Exactly, to maintain your capacity for long-term, sustained problem solving. And importantly, you must actively push your vocabulary.
Meaning what? No spell check.
More like, instead of letting an algorithm pick the most efficient, generic words for your emails, challenge yourself to move your thoughts from vague to precise completely on your own.
The irony is profound here. The more frictionless and easy AI makes our lives, the more we have to artificially invent these boring, difficult struggles just to keep our brains from turning to mush.
It really is ironic.
And beyond just 10 minutes of puzzles, the paper suggests broader lifestyle changes too, like navigate somewhere without your phone once a week.
Get lost on purpose.
Literally, get lost and force your hippocampus to build a map. Write your first drafts from scratch before you ask an AI to clean them up. Learn to structure an argument by hand. Embrace the struggle.
Because the struggle is where the real learning lives. The goal isn't to beat the AI at its own game.
You can't.
No, and you shouldn't pretend the technology doesn't exist either. The goal is to ensure you remain the master of the tool.
Right.
You want to combine the incredible scale and efficiency of the machine with the distinct sharpness and synthesis of the human mind. Instead of an AI handing you an instant answer, you build habits that force you to think first.
So the overarching lesson from this entire deep dive is basically a biological absolute. Use it or lose it.
That's it.
Your brain is a muscle. If you choose the path of least resistance every single time you encounter a problem, you are actively choosing permanent cognitive decline.
It's a choice.
It is. You do not have to choose between convenience and intelligence, but you do have to choose friction. Stop outsourcing your thinking, choose the hard path occasionally, and keep your brain alive.
I want to leave you with one final thought, building on what we discussed earlier about the brain's physical structure.
Okay, let's hear it.
We learned today that the hippocampus, the exact same part of the brain we use to navigate physical streets, is also the part of the brain responsible for imagining the future.
Right, the associative engine.
Exactly. So if we spend our entire lives blindly following the blue line on a map and letting AI connect all of our complex concepts for us, are we literally eroding our biological capacity to envision our own futures?
Wow. That is something to seriously think about the next time you open a chatbot to do your thinking for you. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep struggling. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Take care.